Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Going to be finishing off our show here with some NFL talk, starting with the breaking news that the Texans have signed Nico Collins to a 3-year contract extension worth about $72.5 million, $75 million actually, $52 million guaranteed with a chance to make up to $75 million. Nico Collins had a breakout year last season for the Texans. 1,297 yards, 80 receptions, and 8 touchdowns. Career highs in each category, and top 23 in the league in each category. And, to some degree, sort of came out of nowhere. He was a third-round pick in 2021 and was very quiet to begin his NFL career. That being said, was playing with, I would say, some subpar quarterback play. Davis Mills had maybe a couple moments in there, but it was clear the Texans were without a true franchise quarterback. And Nico Collins, something about his development over the course of his first couple of years, he was just the ultimate safety blanket, it felt like, for CJ Stroud this past season, where Collins isn't necessarily this extremely high-end athlete that is going to burn defenders on a regular basis necessarily, but he is just incredibly reliable and was massive for Stroud and the Texans on third down conversions and in the red zone, where he had some really impressive red zone stats. And again, keep in mind, it's not like he's this overwhelming athlete with tremendous size. Now, he's 6'4", so he's definitely not small by any means, but 215 pounds. It's not like he's just going up over the top of these defenders, but his route running is just so tremendous, and his anticipation as well. And he developed a really good rapport with CJ Stroud at a time where Stroud needed to have a go-to guy. And 6 of Collins' 8 touchdowns this season came in the red zone. He caught over half of Stroud's red zone touchdown passes, 8 of his 15. So, Nico Collins was an extremely impactful player here for the Texans, being in the position where they currently are, where he was able to help grow CJ Stroud. And Stroud, obviously, give him his credit as well, because he's the one that is this tremendous talent that seems like he is going to be leading the Texans to successful years for the time to come. But being able to have somebody he really trusted. Now, obviously, keep in mind, there were other options on that offense as well, such as Tank Dell, and they also brought in Dalton Schultz last offseason, who was another very successful option for the Texans, especially when it comes to those red zone possessions. But, Collins rightfully gets paid in this situation where he was coming up on an expiring contract, and he's now going to be paid through the next few years. Another example of the Texans taking advantage of the fact that they are going to have potentially a top 10 quarterback in the league on a rookie contract in CJ Stroud for years to come here. So, super encouraging stuff from the Texans altogether. We've talked at length about their offseason, over the course of the year. Stefon Diggs is the big name guy that they brought in, but I liked a lot of their defensive additions as well. And it seems like they're going to be in a really good position to contend once again, where they won 10 games last year. Now, I do think that their division is going to be slightly better. I am expecting a Jaguars bounce-back season. I know that some people are not necessarily fully on that same boat with me. Got some comments on a video I did last week about how bad Trevor Lawrence is. I'm not necessarily ready to go quite that far. Listen, I'm frustrated with Lawrence as well to some degree in terms of whether or not they are going to necessarily ever see the full version of Trevor Lawrence that we were expecting when, as he was coming into the NFL, he was seen as the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. He was a prolific winner at college, and the love for him is definitely warranted, but we haven't necessarily seen the consistency for him just yet. And as much as I disagree with the take that we got about the fact that Trevor Lawrence is absolutely trash, I do think that, we are sort of basing him off of a 9-win season in which he won a playoff game that took one of the biggest collapses, and playing the Chargers, who are sort of known for, especially during the Staley era. I can't believe Staley wasn't fired after that game in particular, but that's a whole different conversation. But the majority of his stock is sort of going into this one playoff game. And that being said, I thought he showed a lot of flashes with some of the late game comebacks that he had against the Ravens and the Cowboys as well. And he was sort of masterful in that second half. He was a disaster in the first half, though. I think he threw 3 interceptions. But going off a little bit on a Jaguars tangent here, just on the note of that division, the Colts could definitely be better as well, but the Texans are shaping into a real contender, as we have Christopher Shepard in the comment section saying, huge for Houston, wouldn't be surprised if they made a Super Bowl run. Absolutely. And some of the sports books sort of back that up as well. And again, we're going to very shortly here be getting into some of the NFL awards for next season as well. But one thing I sort of wanted to highlight, CJ Stroud tied for top 3 in MVP odds, and the Texans, if you want to look at the Super Bowl odds, they are 7th, which, all things considered, a massive step forward from where we thought they could have been entering last season, where they had the number 2 overall pick for a reason, and they end up sort of turning that and making a trade, giving up their 2023 draft pick, which could have been an extremely risky move if CJ Stroud didn't develop into what he was. That could have been a top pick, but instead they turned that into CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, the offensive rookie and defensive rookies of the year. So Texans are absolutely in position to potentially make a Super Bowl run. Now, obviously, the AFC is loaded in front of them as well. You still have to deal with Mahomes and Burrow and Allen, and whether or not you have concerns with, some of the other parts of that roster. It's a lot of very elite quarterback play that you have in the conference, and CJ Stroud in his upcoming second season, we're going to see whether or not he has what it takes to be able to overcome some of these obstacles that will be in his way. Very briefly mentioned it, but with the Colts as well, not to the level of Mahomes, Burrow, Allen or anything, but in his own division now, we're seeing this AFC South sort of build themselves up, where you have Anthony Richardson, who looked really promising in the first few weeks before dealing with injury. Trevor Lawrence, we just talked about at length. Will Levis is somebody that I think I like more than the average NFL fan, but is somebody that at least is interesting. And Titans, I have a really hard time sort of figuring out what they're going to be for next season. But, ultimately, I think this was sort of a no-brainer move for the Texans, where Nico Collins just feels like, and especially at his age as well, where you're not worried about any type of a fall-off, you would think. He just turned 25 years old. A couple months ago, that he throughout this contract is going to be just a real, solidifying factor with this team. I don't expect Stefon Diggs to be a long-term option for Houston, and there's, a lot sort of going on here as they have invested so much into this season. But Nico Collins, it just feels like to me throughout the duration of this contract, he's going to be an extremely reliable target for CJ Stroud, and I'm really excited to see what they are building here, because I really like D'Amico Ryans as a coach as well, and I think that there's a lot of upside with this team. But give us your thoughts in the comments section. Just talked sort of briefly there about the fact that CJ Stroud is potentially in the MVP conversation for next year. So we are going to be taking our final break of the show here. When we come back on the other side, I want to just sort of take an early look ahead at some of the odds. and favorites for each of the major NFL honors. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.